You're listening to, I'm Randy Barkley, and this is Jeremiah Lee, and we are the principals with Tricord Advisors. I'm a certified financial planner, and Jeremiah is also a certified financial planner. He holds the distinction as being the resident attorney, and he helps our clients with legal things like estate planning and trusts and things like that. If you'd like to know more about us, just give us go to our website, which is www.retirementunlimited.com. One of the things that I'm always interested in is what's going to happen in the future. And there's a lot of information that comes out, publications, of course, people are predicting, but change is happening quickly. And one of the areas where it's probably going to change a lot, and that's in transportation. Tesla has changed
the game.
He
right?
really has.
They changed things. Well, I'm excited about this conversation today. Kind of talk through transportation. Part of that's electric cars. Part of it's, we know in California we've come with some mandates of what they want to hit for as far as adoption of electric vehicles and kind of phasing out regular vehicles. But between you and me, we've talked about some of this is ridiculous, some of this is very reasonable, some of this is the way of the future, and kind of having a conversation here about transportation in general. I mean, we have some of this is Tesla, some of this is electric vehicles, some of this is also Uber and delivery and all those things. So
yeah,
I mean, where do you see? I know there's a lot of different things, but what do you see as the 10 years from now, thinking down the road? Let's just give you 15 years. 15 years from now, how do you see us getting around for things that you've read? How do you see, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of comparisons to Tesla to the iPhone. And so when Steve Jobs developed the iPhone, there was about 3 or 4 other competitors. You don't even hear those competitors anymore.
Yeah, Nokia, Motorola,
right.
I think they still exist as companies, but they're not what we think of as major cell phone players.
And Tesla, one of the things that really becomes apparent is that if you're an existing manufacturer like General Motors or Ford, it's hard to just change your entire manufacturing process to do EV, whereas Elon Musk, when he developed Tesla, he is completely electric vehicles. He's not even thinking about internal combustion engines. So therefore, his plants are all doing that. And because he's kind of a purist from that standpoint, most of the analysts are saying he's going to have a market share that's going to be virtually impossible to catch up with.
I think it's fascinating to see an industry like automotive and feel like before Elon Musk came in, it was dominated by big players. The only reason you have other players were, diversity of styles or something like that, a sports car versus.
But it's still using the same thing. You use internal combustion engines, right?
But feel like if you wanted to be a brand new, say, 10, 15 years ago, if you want to be a brand new internal combustion, I want to make cars, I'm a new company, no one's ever heard of me, I'm going to make cars, I'm going to beat Ford.
Right.
That would just seem ridiculous. But with him coming in, I think when it first came out, it's like, it'll always be this kind of niche player, like no one will ever really adopt it. But now, I mean, it's changed. Like you said, it's kind of changed the game like the iPhone has. And everyone now, from my understanding, is getting into this. Volvo and GM and Ford, like they're all getting into the electric idea that we're going to not just have some electrics, but in 10 years, however long they've said
by 2030, they're estimating that 60% of all cars purchased will be electric vehicles. So, and Tesla will have by far the largest percentage of that, but other players too. All of the car manufacturers are jumping into that stream, so to speak.
It'll be interesting to see who survives.
Right.
Who can just pivot, like the Ford Lightning truck.
Yeah.
I saw the commercial of that. I was like, that looks great. They took an existing brand, an existing item, and made it electric.
And again, the Lightning, the truck, the Ford truck, I mean, what's unique about that, not only does it battery, it's an electric vehicle, but also you can reverse the charge. So if you have that parked in your home and all of a sudden your power goes out, you can actually plug in your truck into your house and it will power your house for a certain amount of time.
Run your house,
Which is I think it's a very unique idea, but I think it also has a lot of plausibility for people that, we just read the headlines about Ian hitting Florida. How many of those people were without power for a period of time?
Sure, yeah.
And having the ability to plug things in to run generators and other things like that.
Yeah, charge a cell phone. I mean, it's one thing to use up the power in your vehicle and say we're going to run, our car now is not used. But to say I'm going to charge a cell phone, I'm just plugging in my. I guess you could do that now with a regular gas engine, turn it on. But the idea that you could plug your house in it is great. So I think when we talk about this, the future of things, I see, kind of that same question. I see individuals will have electric cars, but I think there'll be a lot of fleets that will be electric that we
Yes.
won't even, as regular consumers, not even realize, that maybe Uber has, over the decade transitioned to being mostly electric, or
Right.
the Amazon trucks you see going around, or FedEx trucks. Those are big fleets and those take years, but over a decade, I could see that transition happening that we
Yeah.
don't even realize how many electric vehicles.
And that, frankly, there's another conversation about airplanes and trucks,
Oh,
18
yeah.
wheelers regarding hydrogen, and the way in which they are putting together these energy packets, so to speak,
Mm.
for longer term energy use, more like internal combustion, but they're using that as a fuel. But most cars, we have 300 million automobiles on the road right now in the United States. That doesn't count the world. That's just here in the United
So
States.
300 million. Okay.
And we produce about 17 million cars, generally speaking, on an annualized basis through most normal markets. The demand for most cars is that most cars drive less than 20 to 30 miles in any given trip. If you drive through the town, what do you see? Well, you see cars parked in a parking lot. So the other key to this is going to be the autonomous driving.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
Now, most people feel uncomfortable by getting into a vehicle and there's no driver.
Yeah.
And I would say we're still in the early stages of that development, but it's moving quickly.
Well, that would be huge. That would be huge. Like even our city, when we're in Riverside here, they did some development downtown and put in a big parking structure.
Right.
There was a big push to say we don't need a parking structure. What we need is drop-off zones, because it's going to be autonomous vehicles. It's going to be Uber type delivery of people, people Ubering to downtown. And, there's debate back and forth, and they end up deciding to put it in a parking structure.
Right.
But as the future goes, it'll be interesting to see how many cars, you say you drive yourself, drop off, and then tell your car to go park itself, or it just knows to do that. And
or it's not even your car.
It's not even your car. Yeah. Yeah. That whatever the Uber you took drops you off and leaves, goes and charges itself somewhere. I mean, it's interesting when you say that. I wonder, compared to, the commuting hours here in Southern California, a lot of people drive vehicles. Commuting hours, a lot of cars are on the road. And then from, I don't know, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., I don't know what the car count on the road is. I imagine it's much less.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, I mean, when you have a car, you have to pay for it. First of all, there's the capital expense to pay for the car. Then you have to pay for the fuel. You have to pay for the insurance. You have to pay for the maintenance. If you had none of that, only thing you did is you paid for time or mileage, however the compensation is. The numbers are pretty dramatic, and that cost of that transportation would go down dramatically for you.
Yeah.
Instead of owning a car.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we can get some petri dishes of this. Some experiments like a big city, say like New York with taxis. I could see it being something where, I don't know New York well, but a city like that,
right,
where there's enough density of people using this type of transportation that people would do that, almost like a ride share, autonomous driving. I mean, the technology has to be there, it has to be safe, and all those things, of course, first. But man, can you imagine if New York cut the number of vehicles on the road in half? Right. Just because it didn't need that many, because it's just coordinating pickups and drop off.
Yeah, New Yorkers wouldn't know who to yell at.
Yeah, right. Sure, yeah.
But again, there are a couple cities that are actually experimenting with this. One is Phoenix, the other one's San Francisco. And again, beyond this, what's fascinating to me about the research that I'm doing is the tire companies. Goodyear has a whole research division, and they're putting chips in the tires. And what they're hoping is that eventually the tires will talk to one another. In other words, so you think about autonomous driving, one of the biggest issues they had is that Tesla, for example, where somebody gets in a computerized, straightforward driving, what they don't pick up is the stuff that comes at them from the side. And there's been some horrific accidents from that, because those cars have not been able to, I guess the computer's not been able to pick that up. But if the tires are talking to each other,
interesting,
and there's this, the chips are in everything, how that's going to be. Now, most people think that'd be like Big Brother watching you for every movement, but it comes down to safety. It's very interesting when you read more and more about this. And we're not that far away. This isn't Jules Verne, 100 years off. This is probably like 5 years off.
Interesting. And I've heard that where you have like 5G, which is the communication wireless, but to have those around intersections, that the speed of that is the ability of almost like a Jetsons thing, where you see cars just passing each other almost robotically. But things like that could become possible, to say not just do the two cars have to visually see each other, but rather before they can even see each other, the roads know that there's 3 cars coming this direction, 4 cars coming this direction, and tells the cars to slow, or gives them appropriate warnings to make adjustments. It's right now it's science fiction, but how cool will that be?
But I think it's being experimented on the autonomy standpoint. It's being experimented, particularly like in San Francisco and some other urban areas where the robotics is that what food delivery talks about, the last mile. So whether it be groceries or dinners or whatever, and they're using robotics where it basically works on the sidewalk. Now, some of that is a lot of the experimentation on that, the failures and successes, that's going to be translated into cars, automotive side.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see where the robotics is going right now. I mean, in fact, Elon Musk even had this humanoid robot. I don't know if you saw that. But it reminds you of something science, some kind of science fiction thing.
Yeah.
But it's amazing some of the things that they're being able to develop right now.
So I think one of the questions that we get from clients, and we talk about ourselves, is what happens next, not just in the what's the future going to be, but what should I do about it?
Right.
Do I invest in this? Do I just buy Tesla? It's funny. We've read a number of analysts, and we're constantly reading that type of stuff. And there's a few that they have, some very, very positive targets for Tesla.
Right.
Almost the idea that just throw everything into Tesla and the world will be okay, and Tesla's going to take us there. And we don't quite see that. I think some diversification.
And I think realistically, I mean, the comments coming back is that regulators are going to, politicians are going to be resistive of zeroing in on one particular manufacturer. You got to remember, General Motors and Ford still has a really strong political base.
Yeah.
And there'll be some things coming from Washington as well as other countries to protect that
right.
So it'll probably slow the transition down a little bit.
Yeah.
It may take away some of the competition.
Some winners and losers. And I think the political aspect, and it kind of what crosses into the environmental as well, is, there's some people who are very excited about electric vehicles. There's some of just the environmental impact. There's others who are very negative on the environmental impact. Some about making batteries and mining the earth to get these lithium and other component parts. And then what do you do with a used battery? How do you recycle it? A lot of, some of those are engineering problems. Some of those are political problems. Some of those are, being stewards of what we have problems. And then there's also the autonomous version, do I feel safe in this? And I feel like time and development and things will answer a lot of those questions.
Yeah. I mean, you think about somebody in 1900 that was used to, riding in a buggy or riding a horse or whatever that transportation was. And all of a sudden looking at a car coming down the street. They're thinking this is never going to work. Their mind is made up that the horse they're on top of is going to be the mode of transportation for the future. I remember talking to my grandmother. She was born in the late 1800s, and she lived to be 104. So what did she see in her lifetime?
Wow, yeah.
And clearly she got in an airplane and flew to Europe with my grandfather at some point in time before the end of her life.
Wow.
But the transition from horse and buggy to getting into a jet and flying across the Atlantic, it had to have been a stark reality of the changes in a relatively short period of time. What do we have in front of us?
Yeah, right. And maybe that same level of development, I would not be surprised, that my kids or myself, if I live to 100, are getting in vehicles that fly themselves or drive themselves wherever you need to go.
I mean, where's George Jetson in reality? Right. And such as that. But we're going to come back and we're going to further this conversation, kind of talk about infrastructure and some of the other issues that are being contemplated regarding electric vehicles.
If you missed any part of this episode, we air on the radio. We also air on our website as well as YouTube. But you can find us on our website. You can find us on YouTube and get the full thing.